Spare the press. It's now June 2014, and Harry's returned to Britain, and he's explained that the main villain in the phone hacking scandal, Rebecca Brooks, to give her actual name, was acquitted at trial. He remarks about the fact that the evidence against her was strong. She'd strained credulity in the witness stand, but she'd been acquitted. He talks about basically the evidence and explaining that her husband had been caught on video throwing black bin liners full of computers and thumb drives and other personal belongings, including his porn collection, into a garage dustbin just hours before the police searched their place. He swore it was all a silly coincidence. Harry's sceptical. He thinks that there's evidence tampering going on. He couldn't believe that they were letting this woman walk, and that there was no furore from the general public. So it's clear that he feels let down. He comments that didn't people realise this was more than privacy, more than public safety, more than the royal family? He mentions Millie Dowler, the teenager who'd been abducted and murdered, whose phone had been hacked, which actually involved Piers Morgan. He didn't do the hacking himself, but he was implicated in the team that was involved in doing so. He explained that his faith in the justice system took a serious hit as a consequence of this, and therefore he felt that he needed a reset. So he decided that he was going to go and see TJ and Mike. So off he went. But then, despite that helping and returning to Britain, he decided to barricade himself into Not Cot. Not sure why this is, but the next chapter might tell us. He said that he didn't go out much. Sometimes he'd duck in and out of a club, but it wasn't worth it. It was always the same scene, perhaps here, perhaps there, Groundhog Day. He explained that the dubious pleasure of a night out was never worth the pain. However, of course, in preceding chapters, he told us about the fact that the Paps had largely left him alone and he wasn't bothered about it. So I'm not sure why he now starts bothering, getting so worked up about it. He explained that one time he was leaving a club and two men were racing around a corner. They were heading for him, and one had a hand on his hip and somebody yelled gun. Billy the Rock, which is a policeman, jumped forward and nearly shot two of the men. But, lo and behold, it's Tweedledum and Tweedledummer. So they're still on the scene. They didn't have guns, and he didn't know what one of them was reaching for on his hip. But Billy held him and screamed into his face, "How many times do we have to tell you you're going to get someone fucking killed?" But Harry reports that they simply did not care. So they pop up once again in a short chapter, and then we're at the Tower of London. It's now August 2014, and he's there with William and Kate. The reason for their visit was an art installation. Across the dry moat were spread tens of thousands of bright red ceramic poppies, and I went and saw this, and I have to tell you, it was a pretty impressive sight. The plan was for 888,246 of those poppies to be spread there, one for each Commonwealth soldier who died in the Great War. It was the 100th anniversary, of course, of the First World War, also known as the Great War. Harry was certainly impacted by the visualisation of that. He also said it didn't help that it was 3 weeks before the anniversary of Mummy's death. So here he is in 2014, some 17 years after she died, and it still impacts upon him, or at least he feels that it should be mentioned. Her birthday, also, which was July the 1st, was the start of the Battle of the Somme, one of the war's bloodiest days, and the bloodiest day in the history of the British Army. Somebody gave him a poppy and told him to place it, and William and Kate were also told to do so. They placed the poppies and then were lost in their private thoughts. And then the constable of the tower appeared and explained how the poppy had become a symbol of war. Now, just as an aside for those of you who may not know, the poppy is the enduring symbol of remembrance of the First World War. It's strongly linked with Armistice Day, 11th of November. But the poppy's origin as a popular symbol of remembrance actually lies in the landscapes of the First World War. Poppies were a common sight, especially on the Western Front. They flourished in the soil churned up by the fighting and the shelling. The flower provided Canadian doctor John McCrae with inspiration for his poem In Flanders Fields, which I'll read to you shortly, while he wrote while serving in Ypres in 1915. It was first published in Punch, having been rejected by The Spectator. In 1918, in response to McCrae's poem, American humanitarian Moyna Michael wrote, "And now the torch and poppy red we wear in honour of our dead." She campaigned to make the poppy a symbol of remembrance of those who had died in the war. Artificial poppies were first sold in Britain in 1921 to raise funds for the Earl Haig Fund in support of ex-servicemen and the families of those who had died in the conflict. They were supplied by Anna Guerin, who had been manufacturing the flowers in France to raise money for war orphans. Selling poppies proved so popular that in 1922 the British Legion founded a factory staffed by disabled ex-servicemen to produce its own, and it continues to do so today. Other charities sell poppies in different colours, each with their own meaning, but all to commemorate the losses of war. White poppies, for example, symbolise peace without violence, and purple poppies are worn to honour animals killed in conflict. The poppy continues to be sold worldwide to raise money and to remember those who've lost their lives in the First World War and in subsequent conflicts. Now the poem In Flanders Fields by John McCrae. In Flanders fields the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high, if ye break faith with us who die. We shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. So a little more information there about the poppy, based upon what Prince Harry was seeing at the time. He explained that all of a sudden his thoughts go to General Danat, the man who'd sent him to war, and he had turned up asking if there would be a quick tour of the tower. And they had a look around and went to see the crown jewels, and he saw the crown. And it's hilarious because he writes, "Holy shit, the crown, the one that had been placed upon Granny's head at her 1953 coronation." Yeah, I think you would know all of this, Harry. It is quite entertaining the way that here's this man who's about 30 years old or thereabouts, who's still like, "Oh, wow, crown, yeah, that's the one that went on Granny's head, isn't it?" He thought it was also the same crown that sat on Gangan's coffin as it went through the streets. It looked the same, but somebody pointed out some key differences with it. He said it looked heavy and it looked magical. And then he said the more he stared, the brighter it got. Was that possible? As he'd been on the ganja again, one wonders. He said they seemed to possess some inner energy source, something beyond the sum of its parts, its jewelled band, its golden fleur-de-lis, its crisscrossing arches and gleaming cross. Yeah, I think this is a ghostwriter making his presence felt again. He then writes, or the ghostwriter does, "You couldn't help but feel that a ghost encountered late at night inside the tower might have a similar glow." Strange comparison. He says, or rather, it's written that the crown was a wonder, a transcendent and evocative piece of art, not unlike the poppies. But all that he could think at that juncture was how tragic that it was locked up in the tower, yet another prisoner. He said it seems a waste, and he remarked about that to William and Kate, but he recalls they said nothing. He then points out maybe they were looking at that band of ermine, remembering my wedding remarks. Maybe not. Again, I suspect none of that really actually happened, and it's just been added after the event. Well, not particularly deep thoughts there from Harry, but purported to be conveyed in such a way. Next, he's on to Invictus. Join me there.